Good evening. I'm Kelly Yoon. The Ontario Liberals are demanding the Auditor General investigate a critical shortage of medical supplies. As we reported last week, home care patients across the province have been experiencing shortages of crucial equipment for about a month now. The Conservative government says it is working to fix the problem, but as Lorena Redicott reports, some delays still persist.
Stephen Clark is in palliative care with pancreatic cancer. A month ago, syringes he needs for post-chemotherapy treatments didn't arrive on time. He's just one of a number of home care patients across the province struggling to access supplies. His wife wants an investigation.
And then you get, just the Band-Aid of, we're sorry. Well, how many times can you be sorry when Ontarians are being impacted like this?
Now the Ontario Liberal Party is asking the Auditor General to look into the problem.
We need to understand, why did this happen? How is it going to be stopped? What steps are actively being taken to save patients right now? And how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again?
He's written a letter to the Auditor General asking for a value for money audit. Among his questions, how home care providers or suppliers are approved, whether any contracts have been inappropriately awarded, and the cost of the home care shortages in dollars and patient outcomes.
It'd be a lot easier if they just stood up and said, this happened because of this, and this is the way we're fixing it.
Who knew, for how long, and what did they do to fix the problem?
The NDP opposition once again tried to get answers, saying it's hearing the problems continue.
Doctors and caregivers under distress, patients suffering unnecessarily with no end in sight.
The government says it's working on it and that the health minister has been in touch with the head of the province's home care agency.
And authorized and directed that any and all means should be taken to ensure that those medical supplies reach their destination.
As for when the government first learned of the problems, it says it was around a week and a half ago. That's around the same time some NDP MPPs wrote to the health minister, warning of these issues. The health ministry confirms some supply delays continue.
The minister has activated a special assistance team to make sure that those deliveries are made on time as required. That special assistance team is already being activated.
The health ministry says it's like a crisis management team working with the supply company to ensure medications and other items get delivered. As for the Auditor General's office, it confirms it has received the Liberal Party's request, but can't say yet whether it will investigate. Lorena Redicott, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario's Associate Minister of Bail Reform took aim at the federal government this morning. He's calling on Ottawa to eliminate bail for certain offences, such as murder, drug trafficking, or possession of a restricted firearm.
We hear this complaint from the Liberals why they don't want to put people into remand. They say that our jails are too unpleasant and capacity issues. Frankly, we will build as many jails as we need to keep criminals locked up. When jails are unpleasant to be in, and you hear some of the kind of more weak-kneed judges, frankly, that are using this as an excuse not to lock people up, we think that's unacceptable. Jails are not supposed to be nice places.
The Progressive Conservatives say making these changes would reduce crime across the province and the country. The federal justice minister says the province needs to focus on areas it can control.
Also frustrating when I read some of the decisions that are rendered about bail by people such as justices of the peace and provincial court judges, and they pointedly say that they are not denying bail, they are granting bail because the conditions are so deplorable at places like the Toronto South Detention Centre. The province needs to look after courts, court staffing, Crown attorneys, and jails, and the conditions of jail.
Virani added that receiving the letter from Ontario's minister was frustrating and calls the move, quote, political gamesmanship.
So I really felt, in that moment, I felt like my life had less value.
It was flagged as a crisis a year ago, but the province still hasn't updated its protocols around evacuating people with disabilities in an emergency. We'll have that story a little later in the show. Toronto Police and the city are renewing its campaign to educate the public on when to call 911. It's being done in an effort to ease the pressure on a strained emergency line after police saw a surge in people dialing 911 recently. Ali Chiasson reports.
The Toronto 911 call center receives over 1 million calls every year, but it's not always for emergencies. And non-urgent calls can tie up the line for people in medical crisis or those reporting crimes in progress.
And also, if we make the right call, we get the right kind of service immediately, right?
Hence the name of the Make the Right Call campaign.
We all have a role to play. Knowing when to call 311, 211, 416-808-2222, or 911, or even to make an online police report will ensure that members of the communities get the right help at the right time.
Soon you'll start to see social media placements and public transit posters reminding Torontonians that dialing 311 is for city services, from reporting dead wildlife to noise complaints or a tree looking like it may cause damage, for example. Dialing 211 can address things like people in mental health crisis or in need of substance abuse help who aren't in immediate danger. There's also the Toronto Police non-emergency line at 416-808-2222 for something like a car accident where no injuries occurred. And of course, 911 is for emergencies, possible life or death scenarios.
We want to empower the public with information that ensures everyone gets the right help when they need it, especially those in an emergency.
But it's not just call volumes that contribute to long wait times. The Toronto Police Association says call centers are short-staffed, contributing to some callers having to wait upwards of 12 minutes to get through.
Staffing is an issue industry-wide. It's not a Toronto problem. We have approvals for hiring 90 next year, so it's a very aggressive hiring campaign.
Hiring more call takers would be the right call in that case. For the rest of us, the Make the Right Call campaign is about directing your call efficiently so people get the right help at the right time. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
We're just a year and a half out from Toronto hosting the FIFA World Cup, but there are still many questions around how the city is going to afford all the costs. City staff today offering a new solution which could have a big impact on tourists and hotel operators. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords explains.
I've said to the FIFA work team that we are not going to have a budget that are more than $380 million. It doesn't matter who's asking, we are saying no.
Mayor Olivia Chow today on the cost for Toronto to host 6 FIFA World Cup games in 2026. But the city's now trying to find new ways to pay its share of the bill. After federal and provincial cash is added to the existing city budgets for the event, there's still a $95 million gap. And a new report coming to a committee next week suggests hiking Toronto's municipal accommodation tax to make up the difference. Guests pay that fee on every hotel room or short-term rental in the city.
The plan calls for the tax rate to increase from 6 to 8.5%. Now that would raise an estimated $58 million. The increase would take effect next summer and last until July 2026, wrapping up just after the games.
Councillor Brad Bradford says the tax increase will be a blanket cost added to the businesses, even if they're nowhere near the FIFA venue downtown at BMO Field.
Well, if you're a hotel operator out in Etobicoke, the mayor's decision here immediately makes you less competitive. You're competing with hotels on the other side of the 427.
And with annual deficits every year, he thinks once it's imposed, it may never go away.
It's unlikely that this ever comes off the books. I think the hotel sector and those in the visitor economy are probably rightly concerned.
If the tax is increased, this would be the second time since 2022 it's been hiked. Last year, the rate jumped from 4 to 6%. Deputy Mayor Osma Malik says the city is working hard to ensure its costs are covered.
We're seeing the sponsorship and fundraising alongside contributions from the provincial and federal government, helping us to ensure that the cost of this stays off of Toronto taxpayers and it is done well with those additional revenue sources.
The proposal will come to the FIFA subcommittee next Monday. It will then come to City Council for a vote next month. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
A new report is painting a dire picture of Canadian food banks, revealing a drastic jump in people accessing the banks over the past few years. And supply is struggling to meet demand. As Tyler Cheese reports, experts say immediate action is needed from all levels of government.
It's not a new story. Canadian food banks are struggling. What is new is a Food Banks Canada report that says the system has almost reached its limit.
30% of food banks across Canada in the last year ran out of food before the demand was met. It is a very stressful time when you know folks are coming to the door and you're not necessarily seeing the food fill the shelves. We're calling it a 1-2 punch of high housing and high food costs that are driving more and more people to have to use a food bank every month.
Sometimes I have to, manage both. Take a little bit of money from, my food stuffs and use the food bank because it's not enough money, it's not enough income.
According to the report, there were more than 2 million visits to Canadian food banks in March 2024 alone. That's a 6% jump from March last year and a 90% increase from just 5 years ago.
We've had a chronic crisis in poverty and food insecurity for decades now. And what we've seen over the last couple of years is really that go to levels we couldn't even have imagined.
Leaders in the food bank network are now calling for urgent action from all levels of government.
So what we need to see is solutions that modernize our social safety net and bring rates of social assistance up to so that they match the current realities that people are facing.
The report makes several policy recommendations, including the introduction of a groceries and essentials benefit.
To help people make ends meet today and have the money they need for things like housing, for food. We're also looking at support for low-income workers. You shouldn't be having to stop at the food bank on the way home from your job instead of the grocery store. We need investments in affordable housing. This isn't something that we can be complacent about. We are not built as a system to see an ever-increasing level of demand.
She says food insecurity and poverty reduction should be major issues in any election and is asking for the public's help to ensure addressing systemic problems is a priority for government officials. Tyler Cheese, CBC News, Toronto.
In 2.5 weeks, Swifties from near and far will be descending on Toronto for the first of Taylor Swift's 6 concerts at Rogers Centre. Her Toronto stop expected to bring in about $280 million to the local economy. And ahead of it, the TTC announcing today its plan to deal with the influx of riders, while fans, they've been getting psyched up already with a number of special events. Ardell Manukduk was at a sing-along tonight for a good cause.
A sing-along led by Toronto-based Choir to some of Taylor Swift's most iconic songs has these fans fired up for what's to come. The countdown is on, 16 days and change until Swift touches down in Toronto.
She doesn't get your humor like I do.
Perfect. That was so good. Are you guys, anybody going to the concert at all?
I wish. If you want to buy me tickets, I'll take them. So it's the next best thing.
The sing-along isn't just to get fans hyped, it's also for a good cause. A portion of the $20 tickets are being donated to the Daily Bread Food Bank.
We think it's important to give back. We know that Daily Bread and food is important to her, and so we thought we would donate to a charity that we think would matter to Taylor Swift.
In total, Choir is putting on 6 sing-alongs, bookending Swift's concert dates when more than 240,000 Swifties will take over the city.
Are you ready for it?
Absolutely not. I can barely contain myself. I'm so excited. But the TTC, they are ready in preparation for the November stretch.
So we're ready to get people there in style. We certainly don't want any bad blood with our customers, so we've made sure that we're putting extra service out, not just for the Taylor Swift shows, but of course there are events all of the nights of the Taylor Swift shows. There are also events at the Scotiabank Arena. So we need to be able to handle all of those people. We've done it before. We do it for things like New Year's Eve.
The focus will be after the concerts spill out. Subways are going to be running every 3 minutes on line 1 and every 4 minutes on line 2. Streetcar and bus service will also increase on necessary routes.
We'd estimate this is probably going to cost around $1 million, but that doesn't account for the additional revenue that we'll see. We know from past experience, we've spoken to cities where the Eras Tour has touched down. There's been a huge boom for public transit.
All right, take it away. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Peel police have arrested 5 people, including a mother and her 2 sons, for allegedly trafficking drugs in the GTA.
This investigation started with a traffic stop by a uniformed officer. As a result of that, a 20-year-old man was charged with various firearms offenses and later released on an ankle bracelet. Associates of the first suspect were identified, and evidence was obtained that led investigators to believe that they were involved in firearms and drug trafficking. Search warrants were obtained and executed at 3 residences in Brampton, 1 residence in Waterloo, and 1 storage facility within Caledon.
Police seized almost a dozen guns as part of Project Sledgehammer, along with 900 rounds of ammunition and $20,000 worth of drugs. They also recovered 53 switches used to convert handguns into automatic weapons. The 5 accused face 160 charges in total, including possession of a loaded firearm and possession for the purpose of trafficking. Right now, if there's an emergency in a provincial building like a courthouse or a museum and it has to be evacuated, people with disabilities have to wait inside for help from firefighters. The province's goal was to come up with a new plan by next year. But as Angelina King finds out, that still hasn't happened despite it being labeled a crisis.
The first time Oda Alanizi had to evacuate his Toronto high-rise, he couldn't.
I had to keep calling to try to get security. No one knew what to do, and I just waited for the alarm to stop. So I really felt, in that moment, I felt like my life had less value.
The incident inspired Alanizi to create this comic about a lack of an evacuation plan, which he posted online to raise awareness.
Many people messaged me, and I realized, how universal that experience is as well.
An experience the provincial government is supposed to be trying to prevent in its own buildings. In 2005, Ontario passed legislation aiming to make the entire province accessible by 2025. Progress on how it's being implemented is tracked through government-mandated reviews. The latest review from last year highlighted the lack of emergency response protocols for people with disabilities in provincial buildings and called it a crisis. There is often no way for some people with disabilities to safely evacuate a building, accessibility expert Rich Donovan wrote in his review. He recommended a crisis committee be formed within 30 days of the government tabling the report to come up with an evacuation plan and urged that plan be published within 180 days.
But according to records obtained by CBC Toronto through a Freedom of Information request, nearly a year and a half after the province received the report and 10 months after tabling it, a plan still hasn't been published.
What you don't hear is that this is a priority.
David Lepofsky chairs a group that keeps tabs on how the legislation is being implemented.
It's further proof of what an abysmal job they are doing with accessibility.
The province says it's taken a whole government approach to addressing accessibility. In response to the review, it says it's creating a volunteer group of people with disabilities to provide feedback on accessibility issues and is ensuring accessibility is embedded into government procurement, saying the ministry is now working to actively update and improve building evacuation for all provincial government-owned buildings to ensure the safe evacuation of people with disabilities. One long-term option on the table, designated evacuation elevators. Kate Welsh is a disability inclusion educator and artist. Welsh likes the idea of designated elevators as long as they remain safe.
You let people have autonomy. You let people, they don't need to necessarily have their chair carried and have them carried. Like, it's a lot more dignity.
The province is also looking at getting more evacuation chairs like this, which Alanizi used the second time he had to evacuate his building.
I think it's a great idea. It should be a part of the arsenal, a tool in the arsenal, and the fact that not every disability is the same, so it's not going to work for everybody.
Which is why advocates want people with disabilities and accessibility experts consulted when coming up with the plan.
To have our say, not only from a standpoint that we're listened to, but we're heard.
In hopes of ensuring everyone is safe and included. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
We have the lovely Colette Kennedy here with us. And Colette, Halloween is still a few days away, but a lot of people looking at the weather, what could be a bit of rain.
Yeah,
maybe?
it's a really, really important forecast, obviously.
Yeah.
A little bit different in terms of what we're going to be seeing compared to what happened most of my years that I was trick-or-treating, because we're actually going to have very mild conditions coming our way. Let's go ahead and we'll show you what's happening, first of all, with the jet stream. So that gives us an idea of what those upper winds are doing. And usually it's the cooler air to the north and the warmer air that's to the south. And so to the west, you see that deep trough that we have in the jet stream. That's where the cooler air is, and we're getting this ridging coming over the Great Lakes. So we are going into another period where our temperatures are actually going to be soaring. There's a reason that we call spring and fall shoulder seasons, because you get a bit of everything, a bit of summer in there and a bit of winter in here, and summer's coming back at us essentially. So daytime highs today, we did have double digits for Toronto at 10 degrees, Windsor at 15. Windsor is going to be about 10 degrees warmer than that for tomorrow. So they're looking at some mid-20s. Now, we begin to get mild tomorrow, but we also have to contend with some rain showers. So kind of through the midday period, that's when we'll have the rain. It's going to pass through pretty quickly. So in terms of amounts, I'd expect it to be 5 to 10 millimeters, and more so in most cases closer to that 5 millimeter point. A few embedded thunderstorms, there's a chance for that, but more so into southwestern Ontario. Really important will be the winds, because it does get breezy, but it's the direction they're going to be coming from out of the south to southwest, and that pushes our temperatures up. So overnight tonight, even these readings are essentially on the milder side. 6 degrees tonight, tomorrow afternoon, 18 degrees with some of those midday rain showers. Once those pass through, we should get some clearing so that you can enjoy the latter part of the day, or at least into the early evening hours before the sun sets. And then for Wednesday, here we go into the 20s as well. So after a low of 14, 22 degrees. Wednesday, there'll be some high, thin cloud, but it's still going to be probably the best day of the week. But I'll tell you, Halloween not looking too bad there. Same high temperature. We are talking about the cold front going through, so a few scattered showers are possible for our trick-or-treaters. It is true, but it is after that when we're actually going to be cooling back down, Kelda, so we get to hold on to this right through Halloween.
I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to hear that. And can I just say, so glad to have you here with me face to face.
It's nice to be here with you.
Thanks so much, Colette. And that's our show for you tonight. Have a great night, everyone.